Hello, everyone, and welcome to our STX Next live session. Thank you for tuning in and thank you for joining us today. And my guest today is going to be Łukasz Koczwara, our VP of Engineering. Łukasz, how are you doing today?
I'm feeling quite well, a bit stressed, I have to admit this, but it is a good day today in Wrocław, and I have this unique opportunity to talk to you, so I'm feeling good.
That's awesome. I always like to say we're not stressed, we're excited, and that usually works. Okay, so Łukasz, it's going to take a few minutes for everybody to join in. I know for a fact that on LinkedIn, there's a little bit of a delay until people are actually able to join us. So until like 4 or 2, people are still going to be trickling in. So, while people are still joining us, I wanted to ask you the question, who do you hope is tuning in to this session and who is going to benefit from this conversation about KPIs?
Yes, this is a good question. Well, I think that the topic we are about to cover today, so the topic of KPIs, it could be relevant especially for people with similar background to mine and maybe similar duties or responsibilities. So I'm talking about project managers, IT delivery managers, maybe directors of technology, directors of operations or delivery. So I think this is the group who could potentially benefit the most. But at the same time, I hope that today we will find some time to share some use cases and examples from STX Next. So, how we implemented KPIs and actually how we are still implementing them. And I know that those examples, they carry universal knowledge, if this expression is correct, about KPIs. So whoever is tuning in, I hope that we'll have some, takeaways at the end of the session.
Yeah, you mentioned universal knowledge. It's actually quite funny because when I was preparing for this, I thought, how would I define KPIs, key performance metrics? And I remembered, a few years ago when I was joining STX Next, the first time I encountered the term was actually during my first job interview when I was joining here. I was interviewing with Matthew Harris, our Director of Business Development, and he mentioned that, you'll be working with KPIs, you'll be expected to measure metrics that are going to be indicators of your success, because that's what KPIs basically are. But at that point, I didn't know that, so I just had to stop him there and say, well, could you just explain what you mean by KPIs exactly? And he was gracious enough to give me a brief explanation. But today, we're not only going to be talking about universal KPIs, like I set KPIs with my team for how our content performs, etc. But rather, looking at the agenda for today, it's more about these high-level financial KPIs in many respects, and we're calling it a revolution. So maybe let's tackle that first. What do you mean, and why are you calling it a KPI revolution?
Well, I think the title itself, let's admit, this is a sort of a teaser for this session. But at the same time, I think that it nicely reflects what has happened at STX and actually what is still happening. And I'd even say what most probably will happen to any other business who will take a similar path. So a path of becoming data-driven organization, the journey of KPIs implementation. And the revolution, it is happening on many different layers at STX, and as it will happen in any other company, any other business. I think we don't have time to cover all of those, but the two revolutions I like the most are the mental one and the gut feeling revolution, let me call it like this. And in a nutshell, the mental one is all about doing a switch from, especially if we are talking about financial KPIs, as you've mentioned at the beginning. So we are talking about a switch from, everything is confidential to everything is transparent and available. So it's like I run my business on my own at a certain scale, and financial data represented by financial KPIs, this is top secret knowledge. This is confidential. Nobody can access it. Yeah. But at some scale, where your business is successful and you have to operate at a scale, the other people will actually run your business. You have to hand over the power and responsibility to many different people. And same as you before, they have to know as well what is the condition of the department they're responsible for. So you have to make this, the KPIs, the financial data, transparent, prominent, available for them. And it is indeed a mental switch, right? Because especially in Polish environment, I would say the financial topic is a subtle one. People don't like to talk about money. Most of the time, they don't like to disclose money-related information. So this is what is needed, and this is why it is a revolution. And the gut feeling one, I think this is even stronger. This is a switch from subjective feeling into objective view. So subjective interpretation of what has happened because we have no data, to objective view on how things really are, because there is a number next to something what has happened. And you are interpreting a number and building a context of the situation around this. And maybe actually I can give you an example here. We are gathering at STX Next, all of the managers from all of the offices once a month in Poznan, in the headquarters, and we report back to the CEO the status of the department we are responsible for. So basically, we tell to the CEO, how was the last month? And some time ago, the managers were reporting this in a way, we have some new clients, some clients left us, we have some new employees, some employees left us, the delivery is okay, we are on time and on budget in terms of the project budget. And during one of the meetings, I asked all of the managers one by one, do you think it was a good month or a bad month? Okay. And it was difficult to answer this precisely. It was all about the subjective view of a particular person. So this is a revolution, right? To have a system which can tell you upfront, even before you talk to a person, whether a particular month was a good month or a bad month. The same for quarters, same for year, same for whatever is happening in the company.
Okay, so without that, they were actually answering based on what you mentioned, based on their gut feeling. And then the gut feeling can differ from person to person.
Exactly. Imagine, as the company scales and you start with maybe 2 or 3 managers, but then you have 20, 30 of them. You have 30 different perspectives, 30 different impressions and subjective feelings. This is kind of difficult to manage.
Yeah, 30 different gut feelings. So, I imagine, making data open, especially this kind of data that's really, sensitive, like you mentioned. We don't really love talking about money some of the time. It can be, like you mentioned, a bit of a revolution, a bit of a big step. And as I recall, in our case, it started from the very top. So the first step, taking this, chronologically as a case study, was, as I recall, convincing the CEO. So I want to ask you, was it a difficult conversation, and how do you, putting myself in the shoes of a manager, who wants to make my company more data-driven, how do you convince the CEO to share confidential financial data?
In my case, that was easy and difficult at the same time. And if I recall correctly, that was at the time when, a few years ago, when management structures were being created at STX. And the boss, the CEO, was step by step handing over the power and the duties to many different people. And it happened that I was among this group. Soon after this, I was promoted to the director of service delivery. So I became responsible for the biggest chunk of STX Next, 200 people. And yes, I have to admit that was super cool and exciting, and it was boosting my ego.
I can imagine.
but at the same time, it was very stressful, right? Because this was a fresh topic for me, and I didn't know what to do at the beginning. I'm a lucky guy. I'm fortunate to have a great father, and he is a great manager, over 30 years of experience. So I turned for an advice to him. And the first thing he told me, or more like he asked me, was the question, if I know what is the condition of this new department, new for me, I'm responsible for it. And I told him more or less same what the managers told me some time ago, that I think it's good, right? And that's it. And
so
then
you have a gut feeling.
Exactly.
You have this gut feeling that it's good. Okay.
Exactly. And then he asked some, additional questions like, how will I know that the next month is better than the previous one, and the next quarter is better than the previous one? And how will I know in general that I'm doing a good job in this position? In a nutshell, he made a point, right? And a really good point. And this sparked a discussion between me and my boss, and I used the same good questions, so I also made a good point. And this sparked a conversation about how my boss is doing the job, how he is assessing the condition of the company, how he is using the financial data, and how relevant it is to have access and the understanding of how this model behaves to do a correct assessment of the situation and have impact on the progress of the company. And during this conversation, it became clear that at this scale, this is something we have to do. So this is where it all started. And by all started, I mean that was the progressive disclosure of confidential data. And maybe one advice I would have here for people who are about to talk to their bosses is not to be greedy at the beginning. This is indeed confidential, and this is a subtle topic. So it's good to approach this step by step. This is increasing chances for success.
Okay, so what exactly do you mean here by not being greedy? Like, what should be like the initial ask? Should you open it only to like the one level down of management? Would that look like that?
I was thinking about something different. So when you think about financial KPIs, so the most important KPIs which reflect the condition of the company, there are a few of those. There is revenue, there is cost, there is margins or markup. There are some complementary KPIs which define your business. I don't want to discuss them in details. And it is a different issue you ask for everything at once. Everything what is super confidential was built throughout the last 10 years. If you compare this to, okay, let's start with revenue and try to understand how this mechanism works and what has impact on this. And then step by step, let's talk about other super confidential metrics to get a full understanding and full picture. This is what
okay. So it's not about opening, all the data to more and more people, but rather just picking some specific KPIs that are going to be made a little bit more public within the company.
I was referring to this, but obviously, Kuba, what you're saying is extremely relevant as well, right? There has to be a strategy of how to progressively disclose this on many different levels at the organization, especially if you're growing as a business from the headcount point of view. This is extremely important as well.
Okay, so it seems to me like, after having a conversation with the CEO and getting the green light, so to speak, the most important point now is to actually, pick the KPIs and to start implementing that. So what should you consider when you're picking or designing your KPIs?
This is a good question. Let me maybe start with the mistake I made at the beginning. So I was super happy that I managed to convince my boss, to start this journey of KPI implementation on many different local levels at STX Next. And with the excitement, the first thing I did was I went online to Google search and I typed phrases like, top 10 KPIs or mostly used KPIs for software house, KPIs which reflect a service company. And I found a lot of interesting things there, smart things, but that was wrong anyway, right? This is not what you want to do. I'd say today with the lesson learned, you have to do this the other way around. So the first thing you have to do is to realize the business you run. What do you do as a business? Are you a product company or a service company? If you're a service company and you provide services, what is your service, right? What do we do as a software house? Well, it sounds brutally, but we put people on projects. Okay, so this is like the feature of our service. How do we charge for this? We have an hourly rate. All right, so what is the capacity of the service? Well, we can sell as many working hours as there are hours available in a month. And then you start to better understand in details how do you operate as a business, what are the features of the business models you have as a service company in our case, and you have to reflect the business and the features in KPIs. So not the way I did this, to start with KPIs, to start with good understanding and then reflect your business model with KPIs. So this is the first thing. The second thing, when you design KPIs, is that people typically, and this is my case as well, they are very excited when they start. They apply first KPIs and they see nice data, nice results, and they prove a certain hypothesis, and they are so happy that they add more and more. And within a month or 2 months, you have not 10, but 20, 30, or 40 KPIs. And the image gets blurry. You're overwhelmed with the information you have to consume as a user of KPIs, right? So I would definitely, with this lesson learned, advise not to have more than 10 KPIs, and at the beginning maybe up to 5. And the last advice I would have in terms of designing KPIs is to precisely figure out how do you want to reflect with KPIs your business model, also in terms of the unit of the KPI. It is very different. For example, if we are talking about a markup margin for a service company, if you define as a KPI and then later on as a target the markup in percentage and the markup in real value, it is a totally different expectation and goal to achieve a target of 20% of the margin than to achieve a target of 4 million euros as a margin. So this is very important as well.
Okay, so which one would you prefer here, the 20% increase or the 4 million, or just a financial target to hit?
Depends on the strategy, right? So I prefer real value, and this is a case of imagine you're a manager and I tell you, Kuba, your job is to achieve a margin of 20%, and you're managing a department with 50 people. The rotation is quite low. You have a nice portfolio of clients and things are all right. And without changing anything, because of the condition of the department you're running, you can just sit and stare and nothing will change. At the end of the year, after 12 months, you will still have those 20% of the margin. So percentage is not provoking you in any way for growth. And I want the company to grow, right? And instead of 20%, I prefer from 2 million to give you a target and the KPI for 4 or 6 million euro, because this is provoking the company for growth. But it depends on a strategy, and it depends on the context in which you're operating.
Okay, I see. All right. So, I mean, that's super concrete. And, imagining myself as a manager still, and imagining myself with this problem that I'm having, like 30 KPIs, that I picked, and I imagine they might feel all equally important at first. So what would you say to a manager who has these 30 KPIs and now needs to pick these 5 or 3 most important? Like, what are the criteria that decide the prioritization here?
Well, so I would like to mention maybe here about 2 things. The first one, I would recommend to play around a bit with KPIs, right? So before actually finally confirming that this is the set of KPIs we are going to use for the next year, this is the path of the growth for the company, invest some time, spend some time as a manager, picking up a few KPIs and putting them in Excel file, trying to do some dashboards and reports to see how useful they are and to see what sort of knowledge they provide and what they represent, which features of the company, how the company behaves, and learn what is the impact of the actions you take presented in the means of KPIs. So what is the impact of the actions you take from the KPI perspective, right? So when you're growing as a company, your job is to hire more people, have more clients, more projects, mimic the risk of, optimize the risk of a currency exchange factor, etc., etc. And those are all KPIs under the hood. So depending on which actions you take, you see what was the impact of the company. And then you will learn what is relevant, what is irrelevant, what is redundant, right? So you have to invest some time to understand the system, filter out what is relevant, and then stick to only a few KPIs. And one extra thing, I've learned this recently, there is a company called Amplitude, and I think they are more into the product business, but they have this nice concept of a North Star KPI. And this is a measure, single measure, which tells you how successful you are in whatever you're doing as a product company. But I would like to apply this to our environment, so a service company. And actually, we as a business, we have few KPIs, but there's only one, which is the most important and which is defining everything. And the whole focus and alignment of the company is on this one particular KPI. So that would be my recommendation as well, to figure out what could be your North Star KPI and to align all of the operations towards this one. Okay,
so you can start by testing out a few of them, and basically this is learned, as I understand you, through experience and through actually testing the metrics in practice, and then seeing that if we focus on this metric moving, does it actually move the company forward too?
Yes, and I have to say that this is a very important and valuable lesson. It is totally different if you can experience this on your own. If you compare this to, having a set of KPIs given to you on a silver plate with a with a sentence, please use it. This is a totally different experience.
Okay, I see. All right, well, glad I asked that question then. Okay, so, we delved a little bit into actually implementing the KPIs, but now I wonder, you're already kind of trying to backtrack the process that we went through so far. The conversation with the CEO happened. We took a look at designing the KPIs, and now I assume at some point the rest of the company needs to find out about it, and they might have some reservations about it or uncertainty about it. So then how would you communicate to the coworkers, the rest of the company, about this change? How would you tell them that KPIs are now going to be a thing?
It is difficult, I won't lie to you, but it is not surprising at the same time. Not surprising in terms that this is difficult. KPI implementation, this is a change. And people fear change in general, whatever kind of a change. And if you think about KPIs, for a company which didn't have KPIs before and now there are KPIs and we should use them, this is a big change. And people fear it because of this performance letter in the KPI definition. Yeah. So the worry is that it will be super transparent and prominent. What is the performance of a particular person? So in this individual scope, and that it will be obvious, and that KPIs will be used as a blaming tool or pointing finger tool. Sort of those worries. So it's very hard, very difficult to explain this at the beginning and to convince people. I'd say that you have to start and you have to present the benefits. And as soon as people learn what are the benefits of using KPIs, because we were mostly talking about high-level KPIs, financial things, but we have them within marketing department, the recruitment department, operations, and they are adjusted to needs of those departments to reflect how they operate. So if you can show the benefits, then it is easier and better for the people to actually be more convinced and start to use them. And two benefits are like the most in terms of how to convince people are that you can appreciate great work people are doing, and you can finally see this work, right? Because you have a system which objectively tells you that people are doing great work, that performance is superb, and 8 out of 10 cases, this is the case. People are doing, in general, great work. So you can see this and you can react. You can talk to a person and share positive feedback and tell the person, hey, it was, I don't know why, but I haven't seen this before. Now I see this. You're doing a great job. So this is a game changer. And the second thing is when things are wrong, because KPIs are also for this purpose. They work like an early warning system. So when things are wrong, instead of wasting time on this uncomfortable investigation process and asking difficult questions like, did you do your job? What is going on, etc. Objectively, there's data that something is wrong. So you don't have to look over somebody's shoulder. You can focus on finding a solution. So you approach a person and you have a discussion in a way, okay, I see something is going on. How can I help you? This is your focus. How can we remove obstacles together? And this is a game changer as well. So when those things happen, the attitude towards KPIs is changing.
Yeah, in my limited experience, I think it's also good to be in the habit of collecting data and collecting, the data that goes into metrics like KPIs, because otherwise, I'm imagining a situation where, I get asked to actually prepare the data like ad hoc, and that can provoke a lot of thoughts like, I'm being monitored, I'm being audited, why is this question coming now? And instead, with KPIs being as they are at STX Next, it's a matter of course. It's another month, another round of collecting data, and there's not that much emotion associated with it. I know there's going to be a conversation, and also, like you mentioned, there's early warning, right? And a regular check whether we're going in the right direction. Okay, so moving on from that, I think we can, circle back to some of the benefits of KPIs a little bit later too. But now I feel like I want to go back to when we talked about actually implementing the KPIs. And, you mentioned that we started with, trying some of them out in an Excel sheet. And now, before this conversation, you kind of teased that there's this, these further levels you can go with this process. So what, further steps did we take, going back to our case study, what steps did we take to implement the KPIs effectively?
All right. So maybe to paint a full picture, if I were today list which actions a company should take to implement KPIs, that will be my list. Point number one, as we've said, think carefully, what do you do as a business? Understand your business. Point number two, reflect your business in KPIs. Point number three, play around a bit with those KPIs using a simple tool like an Excel sheet to better understand what is useful and what is redundant. And of course, filter out what is redundant and stick only to those few metrics, few KPIs which are useful. Point number four, if you know how, and we can cover this as well, define targets for your KPIs, because this is provoking execution of the strategy, whatever the strategy is. Point number five, and this is a game changer, and we realized as a company, too late about this.
Okay.
Hire the KPI guy. This is a full-time job. If you want to do this properly, and you're at the scale of 100, 200, 300 people, and you want to benefit from KPIs, from really being a data-driven organization, hire a person to extract data, to build data pipelines, to leverage the tools which are in a company. Each company has some internal tools, some recruitment systems, marketing tools, sales-related tools, intranets, etc. Data is there. It's very powerful. It's just that it's time-consuming and most of the time challenging a bit to figure out how to extract data from those systems, how to connect them together, and how to build data pipelines. So my strong recommendation would be at this stage, I think it was stage number 5, to hire a dedicated person. Can be financial controller, because we are referring to financial data with a technical skill set. It can be a different role. And then the last stage, or maybe not the last stage, the next stage is to have so-called single source of truth. So have one tool which is consuming all of those data pipelines from whole organization and presenting data, presenting KPIs to end users, so managers and different sort of roles, in a shape of a dashboard which represents the condition of the company, of the department, of an investment, of an activity. So there's only one place in the company, and if you want to learn something about KPIs, about data, you can take a look there. There's no other place, single source. This is very important. We are using Power BI from Microsoft, and this fits nicely the purpose, but of course, you can use whatever you want. There are many other tools on the market. And the last step, and this is why I hesitated, is that you have to continuously improve, right? What you've chosen, 2 years ago, in terms of, hey, those KPIs reflect my business, maybe this is no longer the case because you did a pivot, you're innovating as a company. So you have to continuously improve and continuously monitor if the KPIs you're using, they are serving the purpose of the strategy and of the company, right? This is very important.
Yeah, I imagine a scenario like, sometimes I hear about software houses or software agencies that not all of a sudden, but they make this change in strategy where they start to develop their own product and kind of sell it out of the box. And then, talking about services and the margin on the services is not always relevant when all of a sudden you're selling a product, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so as you were going down this list, and thank you for making this so compact. You also teased that maybe we could go a little bit more into how we set targets once we already have the KPIs. So, is there any more detail you'd like to add to that?
I can share the way we do this. maybe there are other ways, but I think the best approach is to use historical data. So step number one, you have to measure things. Step number two, when you actually have data, and by measure things, you can even have those internal tools in the company which have tons of data. It's just that you have to extract this data in a meaningful way. But the best way to define targets is to use historical data. And maybe to paint a better picture, let's take revenue as an example. So you want to define a target for revenue for the next year. What you have to do is to take a look on the last year, perhaps the year which is still ongoing, and you have to see what was your revenue in January and what was your revenue in December. So in January it was 2 million euro. In December it was 5 million euro. So this is the first thing you've learned. You can do the jump as a company, growing organically by 3 million euro. So let's say that you're starting a year with 5.1 million euro, and without further investigation that if nothing bad happens, you can go to 8 million euro at the end of the year. And then you start to drill down and you start to learn what was the impact on the revenue and how it was changing month to month. What is the percentage jump? And if there are any trends. For example, we had more clients in second quarter of the year, but during holidays we have less clients or less new business. So you start to learn the trends. You discover what is the percentage jump from one month to the other. You start to learn, how many people were in projects, what was the impact of the currency exchange, and you apply this knowledge to the next year. And then you twist it a bit, depending on what is your strategy. If you plan to grow organically as a business, or you plan some heavy investments, big investments, which aim to speed up the whole process and to create even a bigger revenue.
Okay, so I also wonder, because sometimes we look at our own stats and we look at growth over the course of a year, but then as you mentioned, there's fluctuations between months, right? So is it a better idea to actually look at the growth as it happens month to month, or is it better to compare, September 2020 to September 2019, for example?
This is good, and the other is good as well. So it very much depends what is the purpose, right? So comparing month to month, so the last month to the next month, this is very good for daily reporting or monthly reporting. In our case, when we gather all together in the headquarters, comparing month to month, so December 2013 to December 2014 is good for a different purpose, because December, it is as it is. You have winter holidays inside, and this won't change. So you're comparing similar condition to similar condition, and you can assess if the company improved, is operating better, because, for example, you prepared, you took something into consideration, and you didn't take this into consideration the year before. So it very much depends on the purpose of the investigation, of the assessment.
Okay, but so good to have it in the back of your minds that we're looking at the change from November to December. Then December is, well, at least in our case, December is always a little bit different, for example, right? So it's good to look at the historical data. All right. Okay. So, just to close this off, because we are trying to make this one a little bit shorter, in the kind of whereabouts of half an hour, and we're already a little bit past that. So 2 more questions, and I think we'll be wrapping up. But if anybody's watching this, and if you have any questions, this would be, the last or next to last moments to actually put them in there and have Łukasz answer them for you. Now, my 2 last questions are really about giving. Well, the first one is about giving a few more arguments to the people who are trying to implement the KPIs within their organization. So you mentioned, a range of benefits of implementing KPIs. And I wonder if there's anything else you would add here, thinking of this manager who, is sold on the idea but wants to convince others.
So maybe I would prefer to focus on the top 3 benefits, at least for me personally, not to overwhelm with the plenty of other benefits.
Sure.
Something we haven't mentioned, but it is important, is that if you have KPIs and you apply targets to KPIs, you very much embrace autonomy and self-organization, and this is a key driver for motivation. So in our case, we have few departments in few cities in Poland, and we know what we have to do together as a team to hit the goal at the end of the year. The target is clear. But how we get there is up to us. It's up to me and my colleagues, and everybody works in a slightly different manner, and we are learning from each other what works, what doesn't work. And the fact that you can experiment a bit, you can try out new things, and at the end, at the back of your head, you have understanding that there is responsibility for the actions you take, because there is this business goal at the end of the year. This is extremely exciting environment. Lack of micromanagement, lack of looking over the shoulder. This work trade for motivation, and having a goal and the ability to get there in a way you want to get there. This is great, and it's very hard to achieve such a condition without KPIs and well-defined goals which align the company. So this is the thing we haven't mentioned. Two other things which from my point of view are the best benefits is you can't improve what you don't measure. I strongly believe in this. Anybody who starts the KPI journey and can experience this nice feeling of, hey, I did this action, and finally I can see the effect. I can see the numbers growing. I can see a positive trend. Again, this has great impact on the motivation, but this helps company to execute the strategy, right? You have to measure things to know where you stand today, to be sure that tomorrow you're in a better position. And you have to have a justification system for this, like objective justification, maybe not just justification, but a monitoring system. So that would be the second thing. And the third thing is something we have discussed already. So this gut feeling revolution. This is very powerful as well, especially if you are growing as a business. So to be a data-driven organization and not to take actions, especially actions at scale, which potentially can impact 300 people, 350 people in our case, based on the interpretation of what has happened or your gut feeling in terms of what can happen. This objective view is very valuable, and those are my top 3 benefits of KPIs.
Awesome. Okay, I think that gives managers a lot of arguments in hand or tools they can use to convince anybody they want to try to implement this change. So now the last one, I kind of want to flip the question, because no solution is perfect in my experience, and I think that's just general knowledge. So I assume even with implementing KPIs, even though we mentioned a lot of advantages, there have to be risks. So what are the risks involved with implementing KPIs?
So the first one is that you build the machine. We've talked about all of the processes, pipelines, but after some time you realize that you have wrong KPIs, that the KPIs you've chosen, they don't reflect your business. And it is, there is this sentence I like. I use this most of the time in the delivery environment, but it's applicable here as well. So it doesn't matter how fast you go if you are going in the wrong direction. Right. So if you build a system, the KPI monitoring, the data pipelines, and the whole organization is aligned, and you're going, in a superb way towards the goal. But after some time, it turns out that this is actually not our goal. Then you are in a very difficult position. This is why this investment at the beginning is super important, to really understand what do you do as a business, to carefully define KPIs and later on targets. The second one, we've talked about this, but maybe it's valuable to highlight this. A risk is to pick too many KPIs. And people are, this is my experience, are very excited with this topic, especially people like myself, so with engineering background, with people who like numbers. And you start this journey, and it's very exciting at the beginning, so you add more and more and more. And then you're in a position where you measure how many clicks there were on your website on a particular part of the website, which is totally irrelevant, but it's just nice to see that it is growing. So this is the risk. It's very important to really be brave enough, maybe let me put it this way, to throw away 80% of the things you measure and to focus only on those 20%, which is really reflecting your business. And the third risk, we've talked about this a bit as well, but there is a risk behind this. And we've talked about this when you asked me how to get people on board with the change. So if you use KPIs as a blaming system to figure out who's not doing a good job, and to blame a person, to point fingers, this is an abuse of KPIs, and there is a risk attached to it, right? It purely depends on the person and on the culture of the organization.
Okay, so based on what you said, and what based on also some of my experience, I would say it's not supposed to be a blaming system, but maybe more of a learning system.
Yeah, exactly. It's a system to assist people, to remove obstacles, to align the company to achieve a business goal of a company, right? This has to be clear and transparent.
Okay, all right. Thank you for this. And well, we're already over 40 minutes. I promised you and our listeners to some extent 30 minutes. Well, I hope you can forgive us, because it was this was a lot of very valuable knowledge, at least from my point of view here. One last question before we go: is there anything else that you would like to add here that I forgot to ask about? Because I had this moment when we finish the session, and then there's this, we could have also mentioned this, and we could have also mentioned that. So anything that I forgot or didn't ask about that you would still like to add?
The topic is quite complex, so I think we could talk about KPIs not for hours, but for days.
Yeah.
I really do hope that there was something useful and something valuable, and there are some takeaways for the people who tuned in for the session. Maybe the only closing statement I would have is that you have to give it a try to see what are the benefits. It's very hard to see the benefits before you actually try, and it doesn't work in a way that you will try this at the beginning of the month, and after 30 days you will see positive results. This is a long journey. It takes months to really become a data-driven organization and to use data for almost all of the decision-making processes in the company, but it's worth it, right? So just give it a shot. Don't expect that your company will change in a month, but stay on the path, go with this journey, and then good things will happen.
Awesome. Okay, well, take it from us, viewers. We actually took upon it ourselves to go on this journey to become more data-driven. Łukasz was here to tell you all about it. And that's all the time that we have for today, I'm afraid. If you have any follow-up questions, reach out to us wherever you're looking, wherever you're watching this, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, or wherever you can find us. We're all across the web. And if there are any follow-up questions, maybe we could do a follow-up session, right?
Yeah, sure. Right. Happy to talk about KPIs.
Happy to listen. Awesome. Well, thank you once again for your time, Łukasz. Thank you, viewers, for joining us today. That's it for today's session, and we will see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, bye, everyone.